Welcome back to Settlement Nation podcast. I am your host, Courtney, and our guest today is a trial lawyer extraordinaire, Kurt Zaner from Zaner Harden Law out of Denver, Colorado. Kurt has many notable verdicts and settlements under his belt, including securing the largest premises liability verdict in the history of Colorado for $16 million, and routinely is seen on super lawyers and best lawyers lists. He is a published author of federal and state case law, including a Colorado law establishing the right to punitive damages for victims of drunk drivers. Kurt is also a very notable keynote speaker all around the country at many of the TLAs I'm sure a lot of our listeners have attended. And he speaks on topics ranging from openings and closings, damages, negotiation, and trial techniques from ancient Rome, which I'm super excited to dive into today. But welcome, Kurt. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. The one thing I would say that they didn't get captured that I think is important, that no one ever talks about, because we all like to be trial lawyers.
Right.
And we all like to go in guns blazing into court and ask for lots of money and help our clients and wrong rights and render justice. And that's all great. But no one ever talks about the writing part.
Right.
And my favorite CLE to give is how to be a better writer and to win all those motions leading up to trial so you have the evidence you need when you get to trial to case it up the right way. So that's actually my favorite thing to talk about.
We will make sure we add that in today so that you get to talk about that. And I do love it because, you know, it doesn't matter what guests we have. As you said, it's easy to focus on the great stories and the big war stories, but it's always the actual nuts and bolts that get people through and kind of is the keystone to a business. It's not just the one big, you know, monumental moment. It's all the little bits in between. So I'm glad you brought that up, and we will totally add that to today. But I want to go back in time a little bit. You're young, so it's not too far back in time. But I read in your bio you are a theatrically trained actor. And we actually did an episode a couple of weeks ago with Brian Brider from LA. He runs Improv for Trial, and he was talking about how being an actor for so many years has helped him so much in the courtroom. I want to start with, how did you get to LA to become an actor, and then why you think that has possibly helped you today?
Yeah, no, great question. So by the way, how fun to be on a podcast. I've got like 9,000 podcasts downloaded on my phone and listen to them while I drive all the time. So cool to be on one. So thanks for having me.
Oh, of course.
So acting. So I would say my whole life, but growing up as a kid, I liked people to listen to me and to look at me. I was joking with my wife the other day. My kids are kind of more introverted and kind of the opposite of me. I've been my whole life like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And cool thing about being a trial lawyer is that everyone has to look at you. I was going to say
perfect career.
Captive audience in the box, and they know where to go. They're stuck there. So anyway, I always wanted to be either an actor or a trial lawyer or, you know, some type of like, you know, president of the United States. It's always kids' dreams growing up. At least mine were, you know, student body president, all that kind of stuff. Kind of cliche. But I always wanted to be an actor or a trial lawyer. And for me, the lines were always a little bit blurred because I grew up watching, you know, legal dramas, and those things really inspired me. And I say in a lot of my CLEs that even to this day, I feel like the people that I learned the most from as a lawyer, as a trial lawyer, are fictional TV characters like Bobby Donnell from The Practice or Alan Shore from Boston Legal. And so back to your question, in college, I studied history, but also focused on acting. And so I took acting classes every year, got cast in some plays, did a bunch of scene work, and I just really enjoyed it. And so I knew I had this long life ahead of me. I graduated college and I took all the, you know, requisite classes, liberal arts major, history, so I would be able to get into law school. And I said, well, you know what, let me give this a shot. Let me see if I can go be a movie star and go live out those fictional characters' lives that have motivated me. And not just legal dramas. You know, I love all the other cliche movies that guys like me like, Braveheart, you know, Last of the Mohicans, The Edge. And so I had done all this acting in college. I mean, I wasn't like a theater major, but everybody knew me. That's where I spent a lot of my time. And so I said, you know what? I can apply to law school and I can see where I get in. And in between, I take a year off and move out to Hollywood. And to steal a line from one of my favorite movies at the time, Swingers, I figured they're just handing out sitcoms at the airport. Apparently that wasn't really happening, just a good joke. And I moved to Hollywood in true aspiring actor fashion with nowhere to live,
Mm-hmm.
no job, very little money, just got in my car. I think I had a Isuzu Rodeo and just headed out there. And a buddy of mine was out there working in the mailroom of one of the big talent agencies. I crashed on his couch for a month. And then I went around to all the different bars and restaurants trying to get a job as a waiter or a server or a bartender, because that's what everybody
Right.
does. It makes it incredibly difficult to get a job doing those things. But anyway, long story short, ended up getting a job as a bartender, going on auditions. I got into an acting class. And yes, you have to audition just to
Mm-hmm.
get into acting classes. And I did that all for about a year. Didn't have a lot of success. And I said, you know what? Maybe I could go back to law school. I was going to go to USC out there at the time, but then decided I didn't really like LA. I know you're there right now. I was like, you know what? Acting is so dependent on someone subjectively liking your ability. And you can be the greatest actor in the world and never, quote unquote, make it. And so I thought to myself, if I go back to law school and pursue my other dream, being a trial lawyer, I can be an actor, I can be the writer, I can be the director, and the script changes on the fly, and be a trial lawyer and put all that stuff to use. So I went back to law school and got my degree.
That's so good. And for what a lot of people might not understand is that, first of all, your story could be the start of every great 80s and 90s movie where someone's moving to Hollywood to make it. I did the same thing, but from Australia. So I had to take a plane instead of driving. But it is true. Like when you're in an industry, it doesn't matter how good your performance is, how good your background is, how good your skills are. It still comes down to what people want on the day. And if they say, I want a redhead, not a blonde, or I want a character actor, not a, main character lead, you don't have a chance. So the great thing about being a trial lawyer is that you can actually apply all those skills that you learn. And then it really is down to who is the best on the day, not, subjective to someone else's biases or someone else's deal that they've made with someone else. So I'm glad you say that too, because I thought that was just me. And I'm like, well, I'm not a blockbuster star either. So what do you think was a really good lesson though that you learned from auditioning, and maybe even just to toughen up your skin or getting used to no's and those types of things?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't think you were going there, but yeah, there's so much rejection in the world of acting, and you have to have thick skin. And we lose cases. No one ever talks about the losses, and so you have to be comfortable and confident in doing the best that you can, putting all the preparation in and all the work into it, and still getting the wrong jury, and maybe still getting a bad result, because there is so much you can control, and getting that thick skin built over years as an actor, helps you if a client doesn't choose you. There's a lot of losses in the law and the practice of law. I was just talking to a lawyer on the way over here, and he asked me to do a trial with him, and unfortunately I had to pass because I had another trial back to back. And we were just talking about the grind of the practice of law. And it's hard. I mean, it's fun to do these podcasts and go to trial and give CLEs, but day in, day out, it is a grind.
Right.
And I think we acknowledge that. It gives the rest of us hope on those days where we just don't want to get out of bed because there's just too much damn work to do as a lawyer. So, I think acting kind of helped me with that. And to answer your earlier question, I didn't want to ignore it. How did all that acting experience help as a trial lawyer? I get this question a lot. People say, "Oh, are you acting up there?" No, I'm not acting. I'm being me. Maybe there's a Kurt, to talk about myself in the third person like The Rock. Maybe there's a Kurt trial lawyer persona that's a little different than my everyday. I think myself as an introvert, believe it or not. But the real, I'm not. You're not faking it. In trial. I think the acting training and background helps you to better communicate and better to emote and be in touch with your emotions, the ones you need to draw upon in any type of stage of trial: direct, cross, closing, opening. All the acting has made me more comfortable in front of people and allowed me to really be intentional about the things that I'm doing when I'm in the courtroom, and not just trying to get through some script, some bullet points, and really connecting with the jury, the audience, or the court in hearings. And the acting has allowed me to be conscious in a comfortable way of how I'm coming across, what I'm presenting, how I'm presenting it, and being confident where I can have some fun with the things that I'm presenting in the way that I hope to. That's, I think, where all the acting background really helps out, comes into play.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely see it as well. Like, as you said, it helps you when you have to dive into some character work or something like that. It actually helps you empathize and get into that situation, so you can kind of actually not become the character, but it gives you a better like a whole understanding. So I do love that. But now we're gonna transition to law. So you've gone from acting. Now in your bio it said that you were clerking for a federal judge, and I think this is probably, from what I can see, quite integral in someone's pathway when you're working in such an intense environment. What did you see there, and what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned?
Yeah, clerking for the federal judge. I mean, if anyone gets a chance to clerk for a federal judge, they just have to do it. I mean, there's few greater opportunities when practicing law than to see how things work from behind the bench. And at a federal level, it's great because you get really sexy cases there, and things are at stake. And what I learned, one of the things I talk about a lot in CLEs, is that judges are not thinking about your case ever unless they have to be thinking about your case because there's something they have to do in the case. So many lawyers sit around like, well, the judge is going to think this if we do that. They're thinking about the case. No, they're not. They're just trying to get through their day and rule on the motions they have to. And so, I think it's a good reminder that every time you get in front of a judge is a new opportunity to introduce them to your case, to help frame it in the way that you want to, and to introduce any type of facts or narratives that you think are going to help make it stick in their head and be more sympathetic to your client in a way that you can help them achieve justice. So I think that's a big oversight for lawyers, thinking the judge is just drinking their morning coffee and pondering the strategy of the case. It ain't happening.
Oh, it's really good insight to have. And if there was one takeaway from that time, what do you think it was?
I think the takeaway is you need to always wear the white hat when dealing with the court. You always need to present things in the fairest, most honest way. Doesn't mean you can't persuade. Doesn't mean you can't frame things. But like the minute you lose your credibility by overreaching in front of a judge, you lose everything. And now that is something the court will remember, and they will not trust you moving forward. And so always, we talk about, as plaintiff trial lawyers in trial, we have to do everything right. We have no margin of error. We have to always be the nicest, the most honest. Because one time the jury catches us in an over-exaggeration, misrepresentation, we're cooked. The defense can do it, and they get away with it. Like, well, that's just their job. They're defense lawyer. You have to always do everything right. And so I think that also transcends into working with the court leading up to trial.
Well, I hope our listeners have their notepads and pens out with their coffee this morning, writing all this stuff down, because we've already hit so many gems. Let's take a little switch now into like the practice of law, and something that everyone here that's listening deals with. Walk us through the process of deciding whether to take a case to verdict versus settling, and what are the critical factors that you consider when you're deciding between either?
Yeah, well, don't all the good cases just settle? That's not how it works, right? All my really good cases, they pay you a bunch of money and it's great, and you don't have to go to trial. Just kidding, but there is some truth to that, right? The harder the case, the more likely it is to go to trial. And I can't tell you how many times that we hope that they don't pay us so we can go to trial. And as we all deal with as trial lawyers, there's policy limits that we're trying to get in excess of that. We have to set the hook and ask for those policy limits, with enough time so you can get more, if they say no and go to trial. So, it's a real layer cake of figuring out when you should go to trial. But I think the key points to take away, and this is not rocket science, most people listening probably know this, is you got to believe in your client. If you do not believe in your client, the jury will not believe in your client, and you're wasting your time. You need to settle that case. And not just because the jury won't believe him, but if you don't believe him, how are you going to muster the emotional fortitude and the motivation to get up and go kick ass for them? How will you do that if you don't believe in them? So I think that is the most important criteria, number one. Number two, you want to, obviously it's the offer and, is it fair, et cetera, but that's obvious. Really measure the defense, and if the defendants, if they're likable, if they can be portrayed in a way that is accurate, but also showing them to be, a poor character. Juries like to help people they like and punish those they don't like. So I think those are two big, huge considerations, which are obvious. But people look at a case on paper and they're like, "Man, this case is great. Look at these economic damages and the wage loss." But if they don't believe your client, if they don't like your client, they may have the most just case in the world. But if he doesn't or she doesn't come off well, or the people that are in their lives, we call them the groaners, can't paint a great picture, then the best case on paper means nothing in the courtroom. So you have to believe in your client, and it doesn't mean they have to be super charismatic. Doesn't mean they have to be the most likable, but you have to believe in them. And when you find that belief, then you can find a way to tell their story in a way that is compelling. But that is the foundational litmus test for any decision to go to trial, I think.
I think that's really powerful. And has there been any times in your career up till now where you've had a case and it's been a hard decision which way to go with it? Like maybe you've really wanted to go to trial, but you decided not to in the end, or maybe you had to settle it, but you wanted to go to trial.
Yeah, I mean, nothing comes to mind. It's almost like, you I kind of identify this early on, and I mean, hopefully we're all doing our homework and meeting with our clients, and going to their houses at some point, before the week before trial, and getting to know them. I know that you have a large volume of cases. You can't do that to everybody, but as the case progresses and you start to kind of figure out likely cases going to trial, you do this, and so all the cases we've gone to trial on, and we've done well on, I've always believed they would go to trial, and I always hoped they would go to trial. They wouldn't pay us money and make the decision hard for my clients. And so it usually works out the way that it's supposed to. Oddly, how that works.
And speaking of trial, I want to get into some numbers because you've had a lot of multi-million-dollar verdicts in recent years, including this one that I do want to talk about, this $16 million premises liability one that you had in Colorado. And then I saw that a couple years later, you had another 10 plus million verdict for another electrocution case. There's two parts to this question. How do you deliver these numbers to the jury, and then why do you think you're able to achieve them? So let's start with the first one, because there's a lot of people listening that, it's definitely a struggle when you have a case and you're asking for this much. How do you do that?
Yeah, great question. One of our impediments here in Colorado, or handicaps, is that we have a cap on pain and suffering, a terrible cap. It's about $500,000. And then judge can double that post verdict if they find by clear and convincing evidence that the pain and suffering did warrant more than the cap. So there's always that piece of it. And so we have to be a little more creative. We have a different category of damages in Colorado called physical impairment and disfigurement, and that is uncapped. So any trial lawyer worth their salt puts all of their large damages there. And I have not always been successful with that. In the verdict we're talking about, we lost $5 million because they put it in the wrong darn category, but probably more like 7.5 when you put interest into it. And so, but back to your question, how do you get these numbers? In both of these cases, the medical bills past meds were $150,000 to $300,000. So it's not like we had this huge economic loss. We did create life care plans. And I think, it bears repeating, even though people know this, it makes so much sense to put a life care plan together, even on non-catastrophic cases. Juries are very comfortable with economic losses. And so if you can, there's great companies out there, physician life care planning. They use doctors to put a life care plan together, giving it more credibility. There's lots of other outfits out there as well. If there is a chance you could put a life care plan together, do it. All right. You want to create as much economic damage as possible because that's what juries feel most comfortable with. We have wage loss reports that we put together that, maybe are a little attenuated, but PhD economists get behind it, and it puts another hard number out there. So always, different trial lawyers have different feelings on this. You don't need a big economic number. If you can get it, start with that. That's always a good foundation. So never leave any, even if you don't think the wage loss is legitimate to the fact you'll get all of it, you put it out there, and you give them a chance. And you got to present what you believe is fair at trial, but it's always helpful to put these numbers together. So that's kind of step one. And then step two, you again, not rocket science. You have to believe in the numbers that you're asking for. You have to believe them to the extent that you can say them, and because people will believe you on the jury. I talked earlier about the jurors have to believe your client. They have to believe you too. And that kind of goes back to the acting thing. Not that I'm faking belief, that I'm communicating my belief in a way that is relatable and inspires confidence. So when I tell them in jury selection, I'm going to be asking for $20 million, I better believe it. Because if I don't sound confident, no one's going to give it to us. They're going to guys are shooting for the moon. So I think it's important to introduce these numbers early. I don't think it's your first question in jury selection. I think it's one of your last ones. Because if you do it first, then that's all they're going to think about. In the $60 case, it was one of the first times I brought up a big number like that in jury selection. And it was my first question out of the gate after the whole brutal honesty.
Right, yep.
And this guy in the front, and he knew nothing about me. I had no credibility. I hadn't established any rapport. And this guy in the front row was so mad that I said this, that the judge actually excused him for cause later on because of the physical enmity he was displaying against me.
Oh my gosh.
And this is in Boulder County, liberal place, maybe the most liberal in the country. Right. Big numbers. So it's back to the answer. It's believing in the number, and then it's talking about numbers throughout trial and bring, and so in Colorado, one of the tricks we use is, because we can't talk about pain and suffering, because God forbid they put all of the damages in pain and suffering. We don't talk about pain and suffering a lot. We talk about impairment. In this, you have made different caps in the state that you're listening in. You want to talk about with the doctors, with the other witnesses, with the client on the stand, always about impairment or whatever it is where you can have you the best shot of recovering damages. So it's doing that, and then it's just believing in the case. And when you ask for these big numbers, you can't do it unless you really know the client. And like I said before, you have lots of cases, hopefully. You can't get to know all of them. But if cases are going to trial, you better know them pretty darn well. You better hang out with your clients, get dinner with them, go to their house, because that's when you start to learn about their true story. And jurors aren't going to award millions of dollars in damages for a case. They're going to award millions of dollars of damages if a person's story warrants it. And you can't uncover those gems that will come out of trial that will persuade jurors if you don't put the time in with your clients and really get to know them.
That's so great. And thank you for sharing that, because this is the stuff that I love, is the actual nitty gritty of the things that people should be doing. Everyone, as we said, we love to hear the war stories, but it's the advice and things that they can take home from this and listen and go, you know what? I haven't been to my client's house. I'm going to buy them dinner and go there and sit down with them and look around and see what pictures they have in their home and see how it's set up and see how they interact with other family members. I think that is such a great gem. Everyone, hopefully you're listening intently. Now we actually are going to go to a memorable case. And I say memorable because sometimes the guests that we've had, it's never the biggest verdict or settlement that is the most memorable case to them. It could be a train wreck case, or it could be one that was just so emotionally moving, or such a great client that they want to talk about. So I'm putting this out to you. What is maybe, and I know you have many cases, but if you can think of one, what would be a memorable case that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's all the trials obviously have a special place in our heart. It's fun whenever we have a trial. There'll be like a movie that comes to me, like the 2 weeks before, that will become like the theme for the trial. So like the $16 million electrocution case, it was the Book of Eli, the Denzel Washington flick, and it was like there's this prayer at the end where Eli is talking about he's had this journey and he's been working and he's found a friend and he's so tired he wants to rest now, but hope he's done some good along the way. And that was how the journey felt for me in Brian's case. And faith is a big part of my life, and so it really resonated with me. And so there was the last trial we had, that kind of $10 million one. It was Any Given Sunday, the Game of Inches speech, which so whenever we win, we get like memorabilia, like,
that's cool.
A picture of this or the speech there. But the answer to your question is the case you mentioned about the case law we created. We're now in Colorado for DUI cases. If a defendant has prior DUIs, those can now come into evidence for as punitive damages. And that was probably like our first big long journey on a case. It was just so emotional. It was this family from Iraq. They literally fled Saddam's regime in the middle of the night. And they got immigration status and came to Colorado. And then they're about a family of like 9 of them with uncles and aunts and sons and daughters. And the 25-year-old kid was riding on his motorcycle and on a city street here in Colorado called Federal, 40 miles per hour at dusk, was going 88 miles per hour on a 40-mile-per-hour road. And this other kid coming out of a grease monkey, an oil change place, turns left in front of him, and the cars and the motorcycle and the car collide. And our guy's head kind of crashes into the rear passenger seat behind the driver, and the helmet is deposited inside the vehicle and actually hits the kid who's sitting in the vehicle and causes that kid to get a brain injury. But our guy's helmet falls into the Jeep off the motorcycle, and he falls back on the road and he passes away. And it's all caught on camera. And the driver of the Jeep drives away, doesn't even come to a full stop, stops 3 blocks away in a gas station, looks at his friend behind him who just got smashed in the head with my client's helmet, and he runs. He runs 17 miles with 2 broken ribs, leaves behind his bloodied friend, beer bottles, vodka bottle, marijuana, watches on the news that night as they look for him, and waits 3 days to turn himself in when he knows all the alcohol will be out of his system because him and his dad searched online for how long alcohol stays in your system. And then turned himself in and never got charged with causing the crash because he made a safe left-hand turn as the cops came and testified to a trial, not doing us any favors. So it was an emotional journey. No lawyer in town wanted it. It was finally picked up by a lawyer, then sent us to us for trial. And I got to know this family in so many ways. We still communicate today. They're so sweet. I mean, I remember they had me over talking about visits to clients' houses in the middle of Ramadan when they're fasting, morning to night. But they prepared me and my law partner's feast to eat, because they wanted to feed us. And they were the mother had never changed. The kid's name was Gafar. They never changed his room. And they always had the Quran playing in there with like a candle lit because she knew that he was watching from up above and she wanted to honor him and didn't want to change anything in his room. So it was just such an emotional roller coaster getting to know these folks and then trying to win an impossible case, 88 miles per hour on a 40-mile-per-hour street. And every morning I would watch the scene or the clip from Game of Thrones. I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan.
I am.
Okay, so the scene when Tyrion has requested trial by combat, and he needs a champion, and no one's going to be his champion because the mountain is unbeatable. He has to face. And then he gets this random visit from this prince who doesn't really like him, Prince Oberyn. And he comes to his jail cell. He starts talking to him about the story of how he first met Tyrion when he was a little baby. His sister wanted to kill him, and because he was a little person, and all these awful things. And at the end, Prince Oberyn says, I want justice. And Tyrion goes, if you want justice, you've come to the wrong place. And he goes, I disagree, because everyone that has wronged me and my family is right here. And the mountain had raped and killed his sister. And so he's like, I will be your champion. And there's this look on Tyrion's face. He's like welling up with tears. Like his reaction is priceless. And when Oberyn tells him this, he grabs the flame, like the torch on the side, it's lighting the room, and like brings it to light to his face. Like, I will be your champion. And I watch it every morning because that's how I felt, that I had to be Oberyn and be this family's champion when everyone else had let them down, the police, other lawyers. And so that was my motivation every single morning. And I have a plaque in my office that says, I'll be your champion, and Gafar's dates of life. And so we won that case. We got, a $2.5 million verdict, front page of the Denver Post. And the jury found 45% comparative negligence on us. But that was okay, because in Colorado, it's a 50-50 bar. You have to just get over the 50 mark. And the family was just so happy. And in closing, I didn't ask for a dollar amount. This is kind of one of my first big trials, because the mother believed that Gafar was looking down from heaven and didn't want his life cheapened by asking for an amount. They just wanted justice. They didn't want a dollar amount. And that was it was so authentic to me. And when I tell this, my partner tells a story, and I say that in closing, that I'm not going to ask for a dollar amount. He says, I fell out of my chair. What do you mean you're asking for a dollar amount? But it was just the right, and maybe we got more, who knows, but it felt like the right thing. And I told the jury in closing, I go, this is the kind of justice that you can hold in the palm of your hand, the kind that you always hear about. It's a cliche term, but this is what you dream about as a lawyer, to fight for this kind of justice. Because the kid had never taken responsibility. He got arrested again. And so it was such and then there was an appeal, Court of Appeals. I got to argue at the Court of Appeals. We won there, and they appealed to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court denied cert. And it was just, I mean, that will always, I feel like, define my legal career and why I do what I do.
And that's such a good representation of why, as you said, why you do it in the end. It's to have these, I mean, it's an ongoing battle, kind of another Game of Thrones reference, like The Long Night or whatever it's called. But there wouldn't have been a dry eye in that courtroom. Like, even you telling me that story, I was like, you can see you can feel the emotion about everything. That's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Speaking of your business partner, I want to switch gears a little bit into, being a trial lawyer and then owning your own firm. So I know that you co-founded your firm with Mark Harden. And what has been the biggest learning curves for you going from someone who just then focuses on your cases and practicing law now to actually having to run a business as well?
Oh, it's tough. It's when you start the law firm, we had 0 cases, and Mark maybe had like 3 like DUI cases and criminal defense to start, and then you have this dream of where it's going to grow to and how you'll get there. And then as you take whatever case you can to get in the door, and you hope you can get some good results, and you hope that clients sign up with you. And my partner always said, I had the dream. If you build it, they will come. Field of dreams kind of stuff. And we built this firm we're very, very proud of. We have 9 lawyers now, like 22 people total. And now I get to work on these really amazing cases. And I didn't always get to do that. I literally every big trial we had for the first 5 years were the shit cases. I don't know if I can say that.
Yes, you can.
that nobody wanted, that people would turn down. I mean, like again and again, I'm like, well, we're gonna turn these into gold. And you said that we believe in our clients, and we got success after success. And everyone's like, oh, it's so easy when you win. Well, it's the case nobody wanted, so it must have been kind of hard. And so as the firm grew, back to your question, now you have to manage the firm, you have to grow the business, and you wear so many hats. And if you want to keep it small and keep it all is one term we use. Keep 2 lawyers and just grind it out and do it all, or do you want to grow a little bit so you have the opportunity to cast a wider net to get more cases, and then the fun ones bubble up to the top, and I get to do those. So that's what I wanted, and now I'm doing that. I mean, these electrocution cases. I'm in this big toxic tort case, and fracking explosions and stuff that you don't get when you start a law firm. You have to kind of like pay your dues a little bit and earn your way up. So the question is, how do you wear all those hats? How do you do it? What are the challenges? There are many. I think on some level you have to figure out what role you want to be in the firm. And I'm very fortunate that my law partner is very business oriented. And so he carries more of the weight in that department. Not that I don't participate, and we make all our decisions together, and he gets, we offer perspectives, but it's good to pick a good partner that will at least carry half that weight for you, so that, it's not all on you. The practice of law is lonely. And I do think starting it your own is tough. You got to find the right partner. They say picking a partner is just as important as picking a partner in life, romantically. And so find the right one if you can. And not everyone is blessed enough to find that person, and you have to start your own firm, and that's fine. But you got to think about the business, because as great it is to be a lawyer, if you don't do the business part right, then the firm won't go anywhere. And so marketing, branding, all these things. And so practicing law is a lot of work. And then you add in all the layers of running a law firm and getting cases and branding. And that's an ongoing process. Like even a firm with mine that's very well respected and has quote unquote made it, every day we're like, are we going to get more cases? Are we going to, is it going to keep coming to the door? You got to stay sharp and on top of it. And so it's a lot of hats. And so I don't know if this is where the question was going, but I'm just going to answer it this way.
Go for it. This is your podcast.
Like I'm a big proponent of mental health, and I just feel like, and that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but there's so much stress and so much to do in such limited time in the day. I also have a family. I have 3 small boys I was telling you about before we get on the air here, a 6, a 4, and a 1-year-old. And I want to do everything. I want to be a great trial lawyer. I want to be a great dad. I want to run a great firm. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great partner. I want to do all these things. And there's only so many hours in the day. So like for me, I'm really big into Wim Hof right now. And meditative breathing, where I can get my body fully alkali and oxygenated, and it brings all the stress down. And I need to get 8 hours of sleep. and I need to do my cold exposure. I have a cold barrel at home I go into, and I need to exercise. And when I do all those other things right in my life, then that gives me the space in my brain and physically to get everything else done the right way, including running to practice and trying to be a great trial lawyer. And sometimes you just have to say no to stuff. On the way over, I said no to that case to go try because it was just too much. It was just too much. And I think you have to know when to say no on stuff because your family's more important or your practice is more important or the cases. You have to divvy up your time intentionally. Otherwise, you're going to wake up every day overwhelmed, and I feel like this a lot, and I'm no master at this. I'm still working on it. And you're not going to know what the hell to do with your day because there's so much to frickin' do. And so you got to have good mental health, physical, mind, body, so that you can accomplish this multitude of things that is required of you as a business owner and a trial lawyer.
And I like that too, because a lot of the, quote unquote, very successful, revered trial lawyers that we've had on the show, they do all have routines, whether it's a morning routine, a pre-trial routine, it always involves either walking outside, fresh air, fitness of some type, whether it's gym, whether it's meditation, whether it's sauna, and then also keeping your foundation right. Because I think everything builds, especially as a lawyer. My fiance is a trial lawyer and he works from whenever he wakes up, which could be 3 a.m. to, 3 a.m. the next day when he goes to bed. So if you don't build in that time, you'll never have the time. If you were going to give 3 bits of advice to the listeners on if it's either a mental health or a fitness type related activity that they could add into their day that might elevate their game, what would it be?
Yeah. So, find some time for some kind of fitness that you like every single day. Whether it's walking outside. I like to do Peloton now because I got bad joints. I can't run as much. I used to love running and weightlifting. Always fine. You don't need 2 hours. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Get a good 20 to 30 minutes where you can just clear your mind and get some exercise for your body. I think that's critical. And I think the earlier the better, frankly. Because if you wait till the end of the day, it's just going to wear on you. And you haven't got rid of that. And then anxiety just kind of builds. So do that. I'm going to give another shout out to Wim Hof. Wim Hof, the Wim Hof method. He's this awesome. Don't call him a guru. He wasn't like that, but he seems like a guru. He's a Dutch guy who, very sad story. His wife and mother of 4 children kissed her kids goodbye and jumped out of a hotel window and killed herself. And she dealt with mental health struggles her whole life and obviously failed to control it and capitulated to it very sadly. And so he set about to try and find a way to help people live better, fuller, happier lives without the help of drugs. And so he developed the Wim Hof method, which is 3 parts. One part is breathing. It's oxygenating your body to become fully alkali, getting the acidity out. It takes 12 minutes in the morning. Super easy to do. And you feel amazing afterwards. Then he thinks cold exposure. It helps regulate your entire circulatory system, gets rid of the stress, and helps you be focused and clear. And then it kind of segues third part into kind of mind over matter. Go find your favorite podcaster. Maybe you've interviewed him. I don't know. And find a Wim Hof podcast. Listen to his method. He's going to inspire you. He has set every record for cold exposure, breath holding. He taught David Blaine how to do all these things. And it's a really easy system to implement into your personal life. Like I said, it takes 15 minutes a day, and it just makes you feel great. So that would be number 2. And maybe Wim Hof's not your thing. Try meditation or whatever. But then number 3 is get sleep. Get some sleep and find something outside of the law that makes you happy. Because there isn't, I don't know how you feel and your husband feels, your fiance. There's not like capital J joy.
No.
It's rewarding. You can do great things, but like true like joy where you lose yourself. I guess in trial you get that, but no one goes to trial all that often. I picked up karate with my 2 kids about 2 years ago, and I love it. And it gives me like an hour break, once or twice a week, and it just recenters me and gives me something to do, not thinking about the law, that brings me joy like when I was a kid. So I think that's really, really important. So to recap, fitness 20, 30 minutes a day, Wim Hof or meditation, and find some type of hobby. It doesn't have to be a physical hobby. Learn the piano, whatever it is, just to get you completely disconnected and focusing on learning something new that you can take joy in.
That is great advice. And speaking of joy, I definitely know what you mean. I went to Universal Studios Orlando on the weekend and went to Harry Potter World and nerded out big time.
Yeah.
Drank the butterbeer, went to the Diagon Alley, wore the Harry Potter glasses. And during the day, I was like, this is what it's like to not have worries and actually just laugh and be happy all day and not be thinking about work. So yes, everyone find your joy. And then, of course, living in a cold place, I think that we do Winhoff by default every morning when it's minus 26. So we are down to, we've got 2 questions to go.
Okay.
This is coming to the fun part. This is coming to your keynote speaking. You do work with a lot of trial lawyer associations. I saw Kurt very recently at AAJ in Seattle. I do want to talk about how you use this kind of idea of this Roman trial lawyer techniques from ancient times and like applying that to the law today. How did you kind of come up with this concept, and then how do you apply it?
Great question. So I was a Roman history major in college. I studied abroad in Rome. I fell in love with Rome. I wanted to be a Roman senator. And so you learn all these great Roman historical figures. And Cicero is one that most people will have heard of. And Cicero is considered by some, hard to measure, the best trial lawyer to have ever lived, at least one of the original ones. And Rome was different than America, but not that much different. I mean, people were still people. We forget this. They have their daily needs and the things they like and things that motivate them and drive them and sadden them. And so he would do these great trials in the Roman Forum. And the Forum was like the center of Rome, which is really the center of the world back then. And he would go out there and he would give these great speeches and do trials. And there were no movie theaters back then. There were chariot races, but next to chariot races, this was the event people would want to go to. And so he would give these great speeches and win these great cases, and he would lose cases. And he was also a prolific philosopher and writer. And I started reading some of the things that he wrote, and I thought to myself, well, whatever was working for him could maybe work for us. I mean, people are people, disputes are disputes. And so I started reading. I was in this little philosophers club with my friends before I had kids and had time to do that kind of thing. And there's a book called On the Orator, where he lays out all the ways to be a successful orator and how to advocate for someone. And so I dug in. I'm like, these are great. These are great, tried and true, pieces of advice, and maybe not tried and true because they're not all relevant today, but they still work. And so I started doing some CLEs based on it. And it was just a lot of fun because, someone that we all need heroes, and, there's heroes that we can give hugs and kisses to, like our parents, and there's heroes we can read about in pages of history books. And he was one of mine. And I'm like, what can I learn from him? And it turns out there was a lot. And so I just had to do some reading and put some time in. And so now I use some of his persuasive methods that, they call it rhetoric. We don't teach rhetoric anymore, the art of persuasion. There's even a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, which is all about how to memorize things, which is very important for us in putting together closings. And wouldn't you know it, that the author's person he used on their techniques to how to memorize large speeches was Cicero's method.
Oh, very interesting.
So, and the author was just a regular Joe. And after using Cicero's methods, he was able to win the World Memory Championship at the end of the book. So, so much to glean from Cicero and the ancient texts. And so it was fun to visit those and find teaching points for other lawyers and for myself to use.
And I'll put the Moonwalking with Einstein, is it? I'll put the link in the bio so people can go check that out. And then you did mention before that you have another topic that you really love talking about. Do you want to delve a little bit more into that with our listeners as well?
The other topic, what was the other topic?
It was about all the writing that you have to do.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about writing for a quick second. I feel like people avoid writing like the plague. It's so much easier to just fill your day with busyness, phone calls and meetings, and like, who has the time to sit in front of a computer screen and just write, for 3, 4, 5 hours? It's hard to find. You got to get up early or you got to stay up late. Usually the middle of the day is not the time to get that done. And we talked about joy earlier. I do find that one of the places where I find joy in the practice of law is in writing. And not writing like as a chore, but like, closing off the email like we're doing right now, shutting the door, And the CLE that I teach is all about how to win your case in a page and a half. You have a page or 2 pages for the reader, the judge, the clerk, and usually it's the clerk reading it, not the judge. People forget this. The clerk just graduated law school, doesn't know anything. Write to him or her, not to the judge who has institutional knowledge, who's been on the bench for 30 years. The clerk's reading the brief, and find a way, no matter what the brief is about, to tell the client's story like it's being written in the pages of a book. I use a lot of Lord of the Rings analogies, writing The Hobbit. You got to make the person's, the client's story come alive. And you can do this in every single brief you have, a discovery dispute, motion for punitive damages, whatever it is. You're always going to read the first page and a half. You can be guaranteed of that. You may lose them after that, but if you don't lose them, if you can tell their story in a compelling way, where you don't tell the reader what to believe, you don't tell the reader what to think, you don't tell the reader what you want, but you lay out the facts and the story in a compelling way, so that when that reader finishes that first page and a half, sometimes it's 3 pages, you can't put all a page and a half, they come away with one conclusion and one conclusion only, that this client needs justice. And then they look to the rest of the brief for the legal reasons of how they can deliver that. And you have to, it's like in trial, you have to let people come to their own conclusions. You can't tell them what to conclude. And so it's the whole CLE and what is writing this. So after they read the facts and the way you present them in a compelling way without using too many flowery adjectives, but you can use some flowery adjectives, they're like, wow, this person needs some help, or that defendant is evil. And you can't gild the lily, you can't be over the top, but when done the right way, it's immensely powerful, because now the reader's like, I got to help that person. And so you got to write this when you write it, have fun with it. Don't put legal sites in it. Don't write it like you're a lawyer. Just be a person again. Be a human and write a story that captures the reader's attention. And then you've got them. You've got them for that motion. And now maybe they will remember your case moving forward because you made an impression. You didn't write one of those mountains of boring legal briefs they have to try and climb through every single day. You've given them something different and captivating. And they're like, you know what? We talk about why we do it. You can remind the reader, the clerk, the judge, why they're doing what they're doing. And so if you can inspire them to take action, then they're going to feel good about what they're doing, and they're going to be motivated to help you.
That is great advice. I really like that. Writing for, you're not writing for the judge. Write it, as you said, like a story so people can find it interesting. We are down to our last question. And this is always a very interesting one, and people do like this. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago as an attorney that you know now?
Ooh. Oh, that's a tough question.
Listen, we don't let you off the hook at the end.
Yeah. Okay. What let me stall for time. What would I like to know?
Yes. What's something that you know now that you wish you knew 10 years ago as an attorney?
Do like a Matthew McConaughey thing. If I could talk to myself 10 years ago, my goals keep moving. Wasn't that his Oscar speech, right? I think if I could tell myself anything 10 years ago, it would be, don't stress out. You're going to be okay. Do work you believe in and put all of your soul into helping those clients that you believe in. And if you just do that, things will work themselves out. You may not get rich, you may not be successful, but your soul will be in good shape. And there's this great piece of advice from Bear Grylls, who's one of my other heroes, Man vs. Wild. Now my kids love him. It's great. He's like still relevant. I fell in love with him 15, 20 years ago. Bear Grylls has like these You Choose adventures on Netflix, which my boys just love. And I remember reading an article with him like 15 years ago. And he's like, yeah, my dad told me, he's like, Bear, don't worry about the money. Just do what you love and what you think is important in life and you're passionate about, and everything else take care of itself. And he was absolutely right. And so it's like, we all want to, it's like, if you focus too much on becoming the greatest trial lawyer or becoming the most successful or the most, financially successful, you're going to lose your soul. You're going to lose everything that matters. And there's a great line from Kingdom of Heaven where the king tells Bailey and the young knight that, your soul is in your keeping alone. When you meet your maker, you can't tell him that, virtue was not convenient at the time or that other men told me to do these things. Your soul is in your keeping alone. And that is absolutely true. And so when you're practicing law and you're starting out, the advice was, do what you believe in, do it the right way. And if you become wildly successful, great. If you don't become wildly successful, you can live with your soul and be happy with how you spent your time. So don't worry too much about the success. Worry about doing the right things.
That is great. And also, I think we've had the most accents between two people on one podcast ever. I mean, me just keeping my own, and you're able to pull off so many good ones on the fly. This has been awesome. This is the time to plug yourself. There's attorneys out there that probably heard you speak and just go, you know what, I want to co-counsel a case. I want to work with you. There might be clients out there that are listening. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Sure. You can drop me an email, kz@zh-law.com, Zaner, or kz@zanerhardenlaw.com. Go to our website, zanerhardenlaw.com. Also, your story will be told. That's our little tagline. I think we'll get you there if you Google that as well. We love doing fun cases with great lawyers. It's fun to find the more complex cases that require a little more attention. And you've got, sometimes, and you don't always need a complex case, but those good stories for clients that have been terribly wronged or suffered these awful injuries that need help and need someone to be their champion. That's what we love to do. So I love meeting folks around the country. I love speaking. It's so cool going to different TLAs and people recognize me now every now and then. Any way we can help with cases, we'd love to. There's a great network of trial lawyers out there all around the country, and anything we can do to be part of that, we'd love to. So,
well,
you can call me. You drop me a personal email, and I'll probably respond. Sometimes the emails get lost, but I will do my best.
And I super appreciate your time too. I know you're extremely busy with all the things going on. You probably have some windhoffing to do now, but for everyone listening, if you want to get in touch with Kurt, we'll have his details at the bottom of his episode. And to all of our Settlement Nation listeners, thank you once again for making us in the top 3 trial lawyer podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. If you want to see more Kurt, we can have him back. So let me know and we'll get him on here for a part 2, because I'm sure there's much more that we haven't covered today. And then we'll have to discuss the new Game of Thrones and all that stuff in the next episode. So Kurt, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.